What happens when America's queen of country music goes head-to-head with late-night television's golden boy, and neither one is willing to back down? What should have been a friendly chat quickly spirals into one of the most explosive on-air moments of the year. Tonight, we're breaking down the fiery exchange that left millions of viewers stunned and the entire entertainment world asking the same question: how did it all go so wrong? And trust me, this talk show won't disappoint you. It'll be worth every second of your time. Jimmy Fallon was in his element that night. The lights, the laughter, the easy rhythm of late-night television, it was all second nature to him. The Tonight Show desk was his throne, and his charm was his crown. As the band played its signature theme, he leaned toward the camera with that familiar grin. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the one and only Reba McEntire." The audience erupted. Reba stepped out in a deep crimson dress that shimmered under the studio lights, her trademark red hair perfectly styled, her smile confident but never forced. She hugged Jimmy, thanked the band, and took her seat. Everything felt smooth, familiar. Another night, another star, another effortless bit of entertainment. Jimmy leaned in, flashing that boyish grin. "Reba, you look amazing. I mean, seriously, you have not aged a day." She laughed lightly. "Oh, stop it, Jimmy. I've aged plenty. I just learned how to hide it better than you." The audience laughed, and for a moment, everything was perfectly in sync. But then Jimmy tilted his head slightly, his tone shifting from admiration to curiosity. "You've stayed out of all the noise lately. Intentional?" The question landed with a quiet thud. Reba smiled, but her eyes flickered for just a second. "I've learned not every noise deserves an answer," she said softly. It was a simple reply, measured, even graceful. But the way she said it, the stillness in her voice, made Jimmy pause. He wasn't expecting pushback this early. He gave a short laugh, as if to shake off the moment. "Fair enough," he said, tapping his pen on the desk. But Reba's line lingered in the air longer than it should have, like a note that refuses to fade. The energy in the room shifted, just slightly. The charm was still there, but it had an edge now. Jimmy adjusted his cue cards and leaned forward again. "But don't you think silence sometimes says more than words?" His grin looked the same, but his eyes were sharper, almost testing her. Reba turned her head, studying him for a beat. "Depends who's listening," she said evenly. Jimmy smiled again, but this time it didn't reach his eyes. It wasn't just an interview anymore. It was a slow, careful match of wits. And Reba, whether she planned it or not, had just signaled she was ready to play. The crowd didn't notice it yet, but the air inside Studio 6B had changed. The polite laughter and soft applause were just background noise now. Jimmy adjusted his tie and leaned closer across the desk, his voice suddenly taking on that tone every celebrity guest secretly dreads: calm, serious, and loaded. "Reba," he began, "people trust you. You've got a platform most artists would dream of. Don't you think there's a responsibility to use that influence for the greater good?" The crowd shifted quietly, sensing a turn. Reba didn't blink. "Jimmy," she said, her tone low but steady, "my job is to make music, not speeches. I trust people to think for themselves." It was polite, almost gentle, but there was no give in it. Jimmy forced a smile, the kind that masks discomfort. "Sure," he said, "but that kind of sounds like avoiding the hard stuff, doesn't it?" Reba's expression cooled just enough to make the moment awkward. "No," she said. "That's called respect." Her words hung there, measured, clean, with an edge he didn't see coming. Jimmy laughed nervously, shifting in his chair. "Well, you know," he said, half grinning, "respect can look a lot like indifference to some folks." Reba tilted her head, eyes sharp but calm. "And arrogance," she said, "can look a lot like curiosity." The words hit like a dart, soft in tone, deadly in meaning. For a second, Jimmy froze, unsure whether to laugh or defend himself. He straightened his papers, but the rhythm of the interview was gone. The laughter, the ease, all of it evaporated. In its place was a tension so thick it practically hummed. Reba sat perfectly still, her poise unshaken. Jimmy's smirk flickered, his trademark late-night charm now feeling like armor that didn't quite fit. In that silence, something shifted, a clear line drawn between them. What was supposed to be a fun conversation had turned into a duel, his talk show charm versus her unshakable small-town iron. Jimmy's patience started to thin, and so did the smile he'd worn like a shield. He dropped the cue cards on his desk and leaned in, tone no longer playful. "So, what you're saying," he began slowly, "is that you'd rather stay comfortable than take a stand." The audience went quiet again, the laughter from earlier now a distant memory. Reba's lips pressed together for a beat, and then she answered without hesitation. "You mistake comfort for conscience, Jimmy. I've buried friends, fought through an industry that tried to chew me up more times than I can count. My backbone didn't come from comfort. It came from surviving." Her voice didn't rise, but every word carried the weight of someone who'd lived through everything she just said. Jimmy blinked, thrown off by the force of her calm. He smirked to mask it. "But don't you think staying neutral sometimes helps the wrong side?" It was meant to sound smart, even moral, but it landed wrong. Reba didn't miss a beat. "And don't you think self-righteousness is the wrong side?" she shot back. The line hung between them like an electric wire. Jimmy opened his mouth, but nothing came out. That silence, half-second, maybe two, felt like an eternity on live television. The control he'd had at the top of the show was gone. Reba leaned forward, lowering her voice, the kind of quiet that makes everyone lean closer. "Tell me something, Jimmy. When the camera's off, do you ever really listen, or do you just wait to talk?" Her tone wasn't angry, it was surgical, calm, exact. The kind of line that doesn't need volume because it hits deeper without it. Jimmy's jaw tensed. His smile stayed, but it looked wrong now, stretched thin, defensive. Reba stayed still, her gaze locked on his. The tension wasn't just in the air anymore. It was in every breath, every pause, every heartbeat in that room. Jimmy leaned back, pretending to relax, but his tone told another story. "People want to know what side you're on," he said, the words dripping with challenge rather than curiosity. Reba didn't hesitate. "My side," she said evenly, "is truth, not trends." Her voice was calm, steady, but it landed like a punch. Jimmy gave a small, mocking scoff. "That's a nice slogan," he muttered, almost under his breath. Reba tilted her head, her tone dropping lower, colder. "It's not a slogan," she said. "It's a lifestyle, something you wouldn't understand reading cue cards." The jab was clean, sharp, and cut right through his composure. His smile faltered for the first time all night. "Okay," he said, exhaling through a smirk. "So now we're making it personal." His voice grew tighter, the charm gone. "You're dodging accountability, Reba." She met his stare without blinking. "No, Jimmy," she said. "You're mistaking your echo chamber for moral high ground." That line hit him hard, and he leaned in, voice colder now. "So you admit avoiding the issues?" Reba didn't even blink. "No," she replied, slow and deliberate. "I admit avoiding nonsense." The studio went still again. Jimmy's hand tapped on the desk, the rhythm betraying his irritation. Then it happened. His patience snapped. "You're being hypersensitive, Reba," he said, too fast, too defensive. For a moment there was silence, heavy, suffocating. Reba's chair shifted slightly, the motion so subtle it made the air itself feel tighter. "Say that again," she said quietly, her tone razor-sharp. Jimmy froze. I just meant—" "No," she cut him off, voice steady, but dangerous now. "Say it. Go on. Let everyone hear how quick a man is to call a woman too emotional the moment she stops agreeing with him." The audience didn't make a sound. Even Jimmy's attempt to recover fell flat. He stared at her, realizing too late that he'd stepped into a minefield he couldn't talk his way out of. Reba didn't gloat, didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. The silence between them said more than any argument could. What was once an interview had now officially become a reckoning. Reba leaned forward, her voice steady, but her words cutting like glass. "You call it sensitivity," she said, rising just enough to meet him eye to eye. "I call it survival. You've never had to fight for your voice, Jimmy. You were handed one, with an audience already attached." The confidence in her tone made his defenses flare. "I earned this desk," he snapped, louder than he intended. Reba didn't blink. "Then stop hiding behind it." Her words landed like a slap. The crowd wasn't laughing anymore, and Jimmy's grin, the one that usually saved him, was gone. She didn't give him time to recover. "You talk about truth," she continued, her voice gaining power, "but your whole job is make-believe empathy. You sell laughter built on scripts that mock the people you claim to care about." The jab was surgical, precise, and deadly. Jimmy's jaw tightened, color rising in his face. "You're being unfair," he said, trying to sound calm, but his tone cracked halfway through. Reba tilted her head slightly, almost pitying him. "Unfair?" she echoed. "Unfair is what happens when arrogance meets authenticity." The line hit harder than any insult could have, because it wasn't just anger, it was truth. The silence that followed was suffocating. Jimmy's pen rolled off the desk, but no one moved. They just stared at each other, two forces locked in a battle that had stopped being about television 5 minutes ago. No laughter, no music, just a tension so thick it could be felt through the screen. Jimmy tried to smirk again, to reclaim control, but Reba saw right through it. And then she delivered the blow that ended the pretense entirely. "You want activism, Jimmy?" she said, her voice low, lethal, and certain. "Try standing for something without a studio behind you." For the first time that night, Jimmy Fallon had nothing to say. Jimmy took a shallow breath, desperate to reel the moment back under his control. His smile twitched, his voice softer now, trying to sound reasonable. "Reba," he said carefully, "maybe you just need to calm down." The words left his mouth before he could stop them, and the instant they did, the room shifted. The line detonated like a grenade in slow motion. Reba froze, her face still, her eyes steady. Then she leaned forward, voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried across the entire stage. "Never tell a woman who's survived this business to calm down." The tone wasn't loud, but it was lethal. Jimmy blinked, realizing too late what he'd just done. Reba's composure cracked open, not into anger, but something stronger. Her words rolled out with the weight of decades. "I've fought record execs who told me I was too old, too country, too opinionated. I've stood in smoky bars singing for tips when people told me I'd never make it. I've buried friends, rebuilt careers, and walked on stage the day after burying the love of my life. And while I was doing all that, men like you were sitting behind desks cracking jokes about what's relevant." Her voice grew louder, not in rage, but conviction, each line another strike. Then she stood, slowly, deliberately, with the presence of someone who's earned every inch of the ground beneath her. "And you think you can lecture me about courage?" Jimmy tried to stammer something, but the words tangled. He glanced toward the camera, searching for a way out, for the safety of his show's rhythm, but it was gone. The room felt like it had stopped breathing. He muttered weakly, "This is just a talk show," hoping to lower the temperature. Reba turned her head, her eyes blazing in that quiet, terrifying kind of calm. "No, Jimmy," she said. "This is a mirror. And tonight, it's showing you exactly who you are." He didn't respond. He couldn't. Because at that moment, he knew. This wasn't a segment anymore. It was a reckoning, and he was standing on the wrong side of it. Jimmy's patience snapped like a guitar string. His voice cracked with frustration as he blurted, "You're twisting this." "I'm not your enemy." Reba didn't flinch. Her reply came calm and steady, cutting through the tension like a blade. Then stop acting like one. The room seemed to shrink around them. Jimmy straightened his tie, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. I'm asking for honesty, he said, his tone trying and failing to sound measured. Reba leaned forward just enough for her next words to land like a punch. Honesty? Then here's some, you mistake applause for truth, and that's why your show feels hollow. Jimmy's eyes darted toward the camera, searching for a rhythm that wasn't there. The laughter, the ease, the charm, all gone. What was left was two people staring each other down under the same light, but from entirely different worlds. When Jimmy stood up from his chair, the movement was abrupt. You can't just walk out mid-interview, he said, his voice louder now, the desperation barely hidden. Reba stood too, but slower, steady, controlled. Watch me, she said. You invited a legend, not a puppet. Jimmy's mouth twitched like he was about to argue, but nothing came out. The silence pressed down on the stage until it felt physical. The studio wasn't a set anymore. It was an arena. Reba took one step closer, her voice dropping low but carrying the weight of finality. You wanted a headline? She said, pausing just long enough for the words to hang in the air. Here it is. The night Jimmy Fallon forgot the difference between hosting and humiliating. Jimmy's lips parted, but no sound came. He was frozen, cornered by the very guest he thought he could control. Reba's hand moved slowly toward her mic, unclipping it with the same precision she used on stage when a show was over. Her voice dropped into that low, calm register that always carried more power than shouting ever could. You don't get to define bravery by who agrees with you, Jimmy, she said, holding the mic in her palm. Sometimes bravery is walking away from a stage that lost its soul. She laid the mic down on the desk between them like a final verdict, her eyes never leaving his. Jimmy's face fell. The studio lights suddenly felt too bright, exposing every ounce of his discomfort. Reba, don't do this, he said softly, his voice stripped of all the confidence it had an hour ago. She turned slightly, that half smile returning, tired, sad, but resolute. You already did it for me. The words hung in the air like smoke after a fire. He tried to speak again, but nothing came. Whatever control he'd had evaporated the moment she stood up. Reba turned toward the exit, heels clicking softly against the floor. Halfway there, she paused and looked back over her shoulder, her voice calm now, almost gentle, but sharp enough to cut. When you invite an artist, she said, remember, we write songs about truth, not scripts about ratings. And with that, she walked out. The door closed quietly behind her, leaving only silence, and a man at a desk, staring at the space where she'd stood, realizing the interview that was supposed to be harmless had just become the moment that would define him forever. Jimmy sat frozen behind his desk, his fingers gripping the edge as if it might somehow hold him up. The cameras were still rolling, the lights still blazing, but every ounce of his usual rhythm was gone. Words formed and died in his throat. Every clever comeback, every pre-rehearsed recovery line, none of it fit here. He stared at the empty chair across from him, the one that still held Reba's presence like an echo, and finally muttered under his breath, "We're clear?" But even as the words left his mouth, he knew it didn't matter. The damage wasn't temporary. It was carved into the night, into his reputation, into every replay that would follow. Within hours, the moment spread across every screen in America. Clips flooded timelines, talk shows replayed it frame by frame, analysts dissected every pause, every word. But through all the noise, one line rose above the rest, the one that carried more weight than any insult or defense. Reba's voice echoed everywhere. Respect isn't something you demand. It's something you earn. It wasn't just a quote. It became a mantra, a headline, a mirror held up to the industry itself. Months later, when the dust had settled and the clip had cemented itself as one of the most talked about moments in late-night television, Reba was asked about that night in a quiet interview. She smiled, soft and certain, the way only someone who's made peace with the truth can. "Sometimes walking away isn't defeat," she said. "It's dignity leaving the room first." And just like that, the story was sealed, not as a scandal, but as a lesson. A reminder that in a world built on applause, sometimes silence makes the loudest sound of all. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit that subscribe button, drop a like, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you never miss another explosive moment from television's most unpredictable talk shows. Thanks for watching, and trust me, the next one will hit even harder.